if you get to the end of your life and you look back, I do not want to be one of those people that say, I didn't try to be creative and put books out there. I didn't have these ideas in my head that they never got to see the light of day. I have made, some successes in selling books. There have been some years where I've had some money come in. There's been some years where I lost money. But over the scope of my life, again, I've been doing this since 2011, being an indie author. I want to keep moving forward. I don't know what the future is going to bring. Maybe I'll have a big success. Maybe I won't. But I do think that message is important to other authors out there. Do not give up. Be creative. Write something.
Hey Ron, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
No, thank you so much for having me, Mark.
I want to get to the reason why I reached out to you because you posted something in the Wide for the Win group. But before we get into that, I want to talk about the books that you're writing. So you've got a particular style of book for a particular audience. Can you tell us, tell my listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, this goes way back. I grew up in a family where I had a member that struggled with alcoholism, grew up in a dysfunctional family,
Right.
and back in my 20s, started going to therapy and learned about the adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional World Service Organization.
Right.
And they follow 12 steps, the Serenity Prayer. And at the time, I was trying to figure out, like, how do I basically heal from some of the trauma that happened in my past? And so I started going to those meetings. And then over time, I was like, hey, you know what? I have this experience. It was right before lockdown for the pandemic back in 2020.
Okay.
And I had a goal of writing a blog post a day. I would put this up on my blog and then I would share it out to a small newsletter group. And at the end of 100 days, I said, I'm going to create a book of that. Well, I did that 4 times and I had 4 volumes in the course of about a year and a half. And again, some people were making sourdough recipes during the pandemic, this and that. I was like, well, I'll just write as many books as I can. I write fiction, but then I was like, during this particular period with the pandemic, I want to focus on something that would help other people. And so I wrote these Let Go and Be Free books about how to basically overcome your past if you grew up in an alcoholic and dysfunctional family.
Wow. I mean, wow, that is just amazing. So many questions. I'm gonna go back and say, so the pandemic, that was the trigger for we're starting to do the writing because you had suddenly no commuting time or whatever it was. Uh, had you always wanted to be a writer, or was this something that slowly evolved in your life?
Yeah, no, I had always wanted to be a writer. I wrote my first fiction short story back when I was 8 or 9. Wrote my first novel at 16,
Oh, wow.
started publishing fiction novels, been an indie author since 2011.
Okay.
To date, I've had 18 published fiction books, but I really didn't do a lot of nonfiction.
Right.
And so I decided, hey, I've been doing all the fiction thing. I know how to do all the writing. I have all this other experience. I have my uh, we'll just say official background. And I've got a master's degree. I wrote a Jungian psychological approach on Margaret Atwood and Alice Walker of how they overcame trauma through their writing. And I was like, well, why don't I do something similar? Again, it was right before the pandemic. And then when the pandemic happened, I was like, oh, I'm just going to really explore this because to your point, I didn't have commuting time. We were in lockdown. And I was like, well, I need something to kind of be an outlet. And I just went all in and decided to write these 4 books in a very short amount of time. I didn't have a lot of success with my fiction writing. We could talk about fiction and, if you like, of how challenging that is for marketing. With the nonfiction, I just found it was easier to get the word out through different groups, through different like Amazon ads. And for whatever reason, that market seemed maybe it was such a niche that I was able to hit the right place at the right time. And I've had to date, my best success as an author is with these books.
Wow. So I want to go back to this because you got your master's and your thesis was Alice Walker and Margaret Atwood and trauma. and yet you were working on novels, and then in 2020 you took something that had always been there, obviously, something that you'd been dealing with, and started writing those essays. What for anyone listening, because I'm sure there's people who are listening who's like, because it's not an uncommon challenge that people face. So, what are the titles of these four books that you've put out?
Yeah, let me pull the exact title.
Yeah, of course.
Hang on a second. I apologize. I don't have this already at my fingertips. The first volume is Let Go and Be Free: 100 Daily Reflections for Adult Children of Alcoholics. So
Okay.
again, the point of the first book was to be, I've got this 100 reflections every day. You would read a short, you know, page or two, and would help you kind of get your mindset through the
Right.
course of the day. And
Okay.
at the time that I wrote this, I think there were a lot of people looking for some kind of guidance, some kind of help, because
Yeah.
many of us, what do we do at this time? We're in lockdown. How do we overcome this? And I
Yeah.
was able to get this book out at the right time.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, cool. So that was the first one. And then what's the next one?
The next one, you'll see there's a theme here. It was Let Go and Be Free: 100 New Daily
Ah,
Reflections,
look at that. Okay.
and then yeah, so it was basically, 100 new, 100 more
Okay. All
reflections,
right.
and then 100 final reflections. And it was just, my point was, I wanted to do at least 365. So
Yes.
I did 100 per book.
Right.
I did over 365.
Yeah.
And the point was, you would have each day a person could read, you know, a,
Yeah.
a reflection, a passage, a page or two, different, dealing with topics on, how to focus on dealing with anxiety, catastrophizing, dealing with letting go of something, dealing with stress. I've had
Mm.
topics, that you don't necessarily have to have grown up in an alcoholic family to have those,
Yeah. Yeah.
struggles. But I wanted to focus on something, that things I've either learned in therapy, in going to different ACOA meetings over the years, or what I've learned through other self-help books, et cetera. Something that, again, that I could give back to a community.
Yeah. Well, and I guess because this is something that was very personal for you, this was something you were helping yourself, but you were also reaching out and helping others. You probably heard from people who've discovered these books, or I imagine the blogs themselves, the comments, I imagine the interaction, right?
I have to say, on the blog itself, interactions were very small, but through email, from people replying to me on newsletter lists,
Right.
or responding through reviews and such on, Amazon and other platforms, it was nice to see that the book had hit,
Yeah.
a market that people were interested in. And to your point, I was thinking, well, this is helping me. And if it's helping me, and if I could share it to others, my point wasn't necessarily to make lots of money, which, again, I haven't. It's more focusing on, how can I put a product out creatively that I really respect what I'm putting out in there, doing the best that I can, share that with the world as a low cost as possible to help others. And that seemed to, again, be at the right place at the right time. And there was an audience that was there, which
Yeah.
was great.
And I was even imagining, I was just thinking about that. Somebody commenting on a blog that's public. Maybe it's more of a private sort. I imagine because I've also had these sort of comments from listeners when I share stuff that's very personal on the podcast, for example, is I will get not necessarily a public comment that other people can see, but I'll get a private email where somebody wants to share something. Thank you, because something very similar happened to me here. Let me share it with you. And of course, I respect that privacy. I imagine that that same sort of thing happened, right?
Exactly. Yes. That's where I received, more feedback on a personal nature, where people reached out and shared their feedback of how the book helped them. And I have to say, reading some of the reviews that people have left too, it was nice to be able to see that,
Yeah.
again, that I was able to share something. That the interesting thing to me when I look back is, when I look at my fiction work, these themes of overcoming trauma and stress, they're all in my fiction books.
Right.
And when I switched to nonfiction, it seemed to be, people were looking more for help and guidance on something of a like a, like, hey, I need something to kind of help me through these struggles. Whereas my fiction books were doing something similar, but in a different way. And
Yeah.
that didn't seem to hit the same audience, the same market, which I found really interesting.
Yeah.
The topics of what I'm writing about is pretty much the same. One was
Right.
in fiction, a character overcoming such struggles, but in nonfiction, that's where it seemed to be really hitting more people on a
Right.
on a basis where they can really latch onto and kind of follow.
So I always love, because I've been in the book industry since the early 90s, I always love to reflect on this. And I know most people don't read. People who don't read will read a nonfiction book if it pertains to something useful to them. Whereas, you know
Right.
what I mean? Like 1 in 4 adults in the US has actually read a book since high school. And so
Yeah.
the 1 in 4 who regularly read, who've discovered your fiction, probably go see themselves, right? That's the thing, is representation in fiction, and it's so important. You read something and go, oh my God, yes, I know, buddy, I get it. And that's probably helped those people, but there's not as many, unfortunately. Therefore, it's like, oh, I need this. I need to I need to quit smoking. I need to deal with these issues that I've not like. So interesting, interesting. So what I'm curious about is, has this changed what you plan on focusing on as a writer? Or I mean, you still writing fiction, or is it nonfiction now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've struggled with this, and the best answer that I can give you is I want to do both.
Yes.
I am currently writing another fiction book. It's a sequel to a book I released last year. I didn't really do any marketing because it's a new series. It's a book one.
Right.
And as you probably know, marketing something where it's just book one and there isn't a book two yet probably doesn't make a lot of sense to spend
Right.
money in that area yet. So I'm thinking, let's work on book two, probably going to be a book three, finish that series. And in the meantime, I'm starting to put together what do I want to do with this other nonfiction series. I had a podcast called Let Go and Be Free. It was almost 3 years old. I
Wow.
just closed the podcast because I had to come to the decision of I only have so many hours in the day.
Right.
And if I want to write another book, I can't do the podcast, I can't do the fiction, I can't do the day job and all the other things in my life, my family, etc. Something I needed to let go of.
Right.
Part of, again, my message of sometimes we need to let go of things. And
Yeah.
so I've let go of the podcast, and that has made more space for me so that I can focus on what do I want to do with other books. And I'm looking now, I finished book volume four of the Let Go and Be Free series. At this point, it's almost 4 years ago. So
Wow.
I think that I could really kind of come things a different perspective. The world is a different place than what it was, 4 years ago. Um, so I haven't started anything yet with nonfiction, but my intention is I'm going to finish the fiction book and then switch gears and do something in nonfiction.
Oh, wow. Wow. All right. So we've teased listeners a little bit about a post that you shared, Wide for the Win, and it's very much related to what you just shared here, because you shared part of that in the post. But you said you had 18 books out of fiction,
Yes,
right?
yes.
How many series?
Let's see. I got my Cinderella series. I got my Werewolf series, Red Door Diary series, Realm series, and I just started Origami series. So I currently have like 5 series that are out there.
Wow.
The biggest one is my Cinderella Secret Witch Diaries. I have 6 books in that, and that is a completed series.
Oh,
So it
wow.
was basically a retelling of like what happens to Cinderella after she marries the prince. And again, I focus a lot on the trauma she went through when she was young. You can see
Yeah,
where
of
that theme
course.
comes through. And she marries the prince. He's a cad, and bad things happen. But then there's this whole growth process where she realizes that essentially she has magic ability. And so it
Right.
changes the whole center of the story, where it's not just to be being pretty and being married to someone, but finding magic within yourself. And so I have that series. So again,
Oh,
that's
wow.
a 6 book series. I've been writing as an indie author. I started 2009, published my first book in 2011, and just have been going,
Wow.
through the years. Just keep putting
Huh.
books out.
Well, that Cinderella series sounds fascinating, actually. And then you said something, a werewolf series. I gotta ask,
Yeah, a were series. I decided to come up with a premise of with Moby Dick.
where
Moby
whale? You
Cap
said. Okay.
where whale.
Okay.
There is Captain Ahab in Moby Dick. It's basically the story of his daughter, who basically is going after and trying to find him after, the whole tragedy of Moby Dick, what happens there. And
Oh,
it's a very like gothic horror,
yeah.
very interesting kind of theme. And it's actually a prequel to my Cinderella series. And I don't want to give any more
Oh,
away of
wow.
that.
Oh, so they're
Yeah,
connected. Oh,
they're
that's.
connected. It's like an interesting world that I kind of built connecting things all together.
Oh my God, awesome, awesome. I'm so glad I asked and learned a little bit about these books because I'm going to check them out. All right, okay. So you had shared a blog post. So you had all this fiction, four series already. You're working on the fifth one now. And you shared something that's very uncommon especially in the indie author community. And the prelude is most and I've ranted about this on my podcast before, is people will share, oh, I made five figures, six figures, seven figures, whatever they made, and they share these big giant posts. And this is in groups of upwards of 80 or 90,000 authors. And you have maybe 100 authors who share that. Let's look at the statistics because I know the statistics because I've worked
Yep.
in the industry and I see the sales is 100 authors out of 80,000 share this, but the other 79,900 authors all feel like they're useless and they're idiots and they don't know what they're doing and they're pathetic and everyone else is making money. But you shared something that I think resonated with tens of thousands of authors.
Yeah, it's very difficult to put this out because, again, you have to look at your own self-worth and you say, if I put out into the world all this effort that I've done in writing and learning as much as I can about AI and marketing, etc., and I have limited budget, it's really difficult to say I lost money last year as an author.
Yeah.
Yet, my purpose in doing that is I specifically want to reach out to other authors that feel similar to I do and say, there's only maybe 1 or 2% that are making these six figures, five figures. And you look at what they're doing, and if you really look into the numbers, because often those people say they're a six-figure author, but they don't tell you how much money they're actually spending on advertising and all the other things that they need to do.
Yeah.
um, when you look at that, you have to sit there and say, just because if you're doing something and you're being creative and you're not being the five-figure or six-figure author, that doesn't mean you're a failure. It doesn't mean that it's the end of the world for you. You suck, you're this or you're that. No. What it might mean is maybe, I'll speak for myself. Maybe I need to learn how to write better. Maybe I need to know how to write to market better. Maybe I need to do better in advertising, etc. I see it as an opportunity instead of saying, well, I'm going to give up. I'd much rather say, I haven't achieved the success that I want yet. So I've been doing this now since 2011. I have been putting out my numbers for the last, I even forget, 10, 11 years or so. And there's only been maybe 3 or 4 years where I've made somewhat of a profit
Right.
over all those years. This last year, unfortunately, I did lose, wasn't a lot of money, but it was still losing money.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very honest in my post. I put what I've spent, how much I spent on marketing, how much I've done this, that, and the whole thing. And this last year was a resetting year for me. I wanted to not spend a lot of money on marketing, on advertising. So I knew that my gross revenue was going to be down because I wanted to focus on other things in my life. And I knew that it was going to be a difficult year. Now in 2025, I have to make the decision. I'm writing a fiction book. I just stopped the podcast. What do I want to do with other nonfiction work? I'm working a day job. I got a family. Again, there's only so many hours. So I have to decide with the little amount of time that I have, what do I want to do? This year, I want to put my toes back in and learn a little bit more about where is the state of advertising in 2025? How can I learn to make the limited budget I have go far for me and to reach out? And I share these numbers because, frankly, I have been very frustrated where you'll see A few authors share, oh, I'm raking in all this money, but you only get to see a little bit of what that really is. They don't really say how much they're spending or how much they're putting out on paying a, other service or some such thing. So you don't really see the full scope of what does it mean to be a six-figure author. And for me, having a family, I had to make a decision and I opted to steady income. I have bills to pay, kids to raise. I did not want to try something where I was so stressed out if I didn't know if I was going to be able to make enough money to be able to keep food on the table for, my kids when they were younger. And it was something that I made that conscious decision. Full time is going to be my job. And then anything I do on the side is going to be a second career.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you for doing that because it's so rare. It's so refreshing and it's so rare to see authors sharing something like that because on social media and a lot of those authors groups it's basically social media where we put a filter on and we try to make I mean I'll be honest, like here I put this is just a black t-shirt but I put this as part of my brand. I always it's like I'm still wearing jeans or whatever, right? We put on a filter for
Yep.
social media to make ourselves look better in some way, and what you've done is decided to open the kimono, and you've been doing this for 10 years, and share, hey, here's the reality of my world, but here's the thing I love about this. Two things. Your final message in that post is I don't want you, the reader, to give up. You, the author,
Yep.
the listener, whatever, please don't give up. That is such a critical message. Because the other thing is you still love what you're doing. You love your family. You've got a job that I imagine you enjoy at least somewhat, or
Yep.
make it work if it's not. But you have balance, and you've decided to quit things that are not being useful to you potentially because they take time away from something I think you're more passionate about writing probably than podcasting, right?
Yep. Yeah, I'll say this. I have it's I wouldn't call it a New Year's resolution, but every year at the beginning of the year, I have a goal of I'm going to start a new book, whatever that book is.
Right,
And
yeah.
so this year, when I sat down and I started to write, the joy that I get in sitting down and writing. Again, my writing time is typically 5:30 in the morning,
Yeah,
between 5:30 and 6:30 in the morning before work,
right,
about four times a week. I have a schedule that I kind of do either exercise or write. And
right.
that's, I bring that through. So it's a set it and forget it kind of thing. It's a habit, and I make that a habit and I keep writing. And to your point, my message is if you get to the end of your life and you look back, I do not want to be one of those people that say, I didn't try to be creative and put books out there. I didn't have these ideas in my head that they never got to see the light of day. I have made, some successes in selling books. There have been some years where I've had some money come in. There's been some years where I lost money. But over the scope of my life, again, I've been doing this since 2011, being an indie author. I want to keep moving forward. I don't know what the future is going to bring. Maybe I'll have a big success. Maybe I won't. But I do think that message is important to other authors out there. Do not give up. Be creative. Write something. You might write something that could inspire so many people. Or as I've had a reader send me a personal message. She has MS and said, I have inability to be able to turn pages, and I listened to an audiobook of your Cinderella book and it transported me, and it was so wonderful and it was amazing. And I was so touched by receiving that message,
Yeah.
from an author, from a reader. And as an author, I say to myself, yes, it would be great to make more money, to be able to pay more bills with being an author. And maybe that will be in my future. And again, I want to keep iterating, keep learning, keep being curious. But that is not going to happen if I just expect I'm going to magically make all this money and I do one book and it's just suddenly going to sell. That's not reality. And I think by being honest with other authors and putting out my failures and my successes and what I've learned over the course of a year, I do think it does help others to be able to question their own goals and what do they want to do. If you're in it just for the money, then I would say, sure, you might have the ability to be able to do that, but you can probably do certain things. And that's not what I'm deciding to do. I'm not in it just for the money. I'm in it for the creativity, the learning process. And I've had some, again, amazing successes. Does it translate into six figures? No, but I don't know what the future is going to bring. I really don't. And if I don't keep trying, I'm never going to know what that's going to be. And even if I get to the end of my life and I say, oh, I only made a couple $1,000 my writing. How many people actually take the time to see their dream, to follow it through, and to do that writing anyway? So I think as an author, that is the path that I have made. It's a challenging path, but I want others to see that it's not hopeless, it's not easy, but it's something that I hope others continue to do. I think the world needs more artists and creatives than ever these days.
Words straight to my heart. Wow. Thank you so much. That is so powerful, so inspiring. I'm so glad that you agreed to come on the podcast. And I'm also so grateful for the fact that I've taken time out of your day prior to the workday. We're recording this early in the morning before heading off to work. Maybe I took away some of your writing time. I really do appreciate that. Ron, can you please let my listeners know where they can find more about you online?
Yeah, sure. They can visit my website, ronvitale.com. Got my nonfiction there, all my fiction there, and I'm wide on all the platforms. I believe in being out as much as I possibly can and getting my work as many different places as I can.
Awesome. Well, Ron, thanks again so much. I'll have links to your website. I'll have links to those blog posts, etc., at starkreflections.ca. Thanks again for hanging out with me.
No, I appreciate it, Mark. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.